Commander Jason Reeve was halfway through a shower when the emergency alarms went off aboard Uns Relic, a hidden research station near the dying star Alara V. The flashing red lights painted the metallic walls in angry streaks as the floor trembled. Under his bare feet, grabbing only a towel and his datapad, Jason sprinted out of the bathroom, heart pounding. The station's iVoice echoed warnings. Unknown ships had entered orbit, no IDs, no communication, just complete silence. That silence meant danger. Jason knew it. He ran down the corridor, soaked and half-dressed, until he reached his quarters and slammed the door open. Inside, his roommate stood still as a statue beside the room's star map. She wasn't human. Veshika was a Trell, a tall, silver-scaled alien with sharp features, glowing violet eyes, and an air of calm that usually unsettled people. But now her expression changed. She glanced down, puzzled by Jason's towel-wrapped state. "You are shedding armor?" she asked with a tilt of her head. Jason, not in the mood to explain human clothing, barked, "We're under attack." He dropped the datapad on the console, pulled on his uniform pants quickly, and raced for the hangar. Without hesitation, Vesha followed, her movements graceful and fast. They climbed into the Sentinel, a sleek two-person strike fighter. Jason sat at the controls while Vesha settled into the weapons seat. The launch was rough. Outside the station, the sky was filled with Shadow's massive black ships, smooth and silent, drifting with eerie purpose. They didn't broadcast signals, didn't show up properly on sensors. They moved like ghosts through space. Jason opened comms with Earth Command, but all he received was a single message: "Fall back. Avoid contact. Too dangerous." His jaw clenched. He wasn't the type to run. As they weaved between debris and spiraling outposts, Vesha studied the enemy fleet closely. These are not Trell. Not even close. They are old. Jason fired a volley of missiles that hit a small enemy ship, yet the wreckage vanished. No explosion, just absence, a hole where it had been. "What the hell are we fighting?" he shouted. Vesha responded slowly, her voice filled with something Jason rarely heard from her: fear. "They are the Voidborn, legends, machines fused with ancient minds, banished long ago. They do not conquer, they erase." The words chilled Jason more than the sight of warships blotting out the stars. As if to prove her point, a massive human battleship, the Archangel, jumped into orbit to provide support. For a moment, hope returned. But 3 Voidborn cruisers turned in perfect harmony and fired. No explosion followed. The Archangel simply blinked out of existence. No debris, no fire, no signal. 1 second it was there, the next it was not. Jason stared in disbelief. "They don't kill, they unmake." He barely whispered the words. The Sentinel was hit moments later. 1 wing exploded, and the ship spun uncontrollably through space. Jason wrestled with the controls as fire bloomed behind them. With smoke filling the cockpit and warning lights screaming, they made a rough emergency landing at a hidden outpost on a nearby moon. Only 6 survivors from the system's defense forces remained. The rest had either been wiped out or simply erased. Jason stormed through the outpost's control center, pacing in rage. "We need to fight back. Earth doesn't even know what these things are." But hope was thin. The fleet was gone. Vesha stood near the viewport, watching the stars as if searching for an answer. Then she turned toward Jason with a look of grim decision. "There is a way," she said. "My people once built a weapon, not a ship, something more, something alive. But no Trell can use it, only a human." Jason stepped forward. "Where is it?" She hesitated. "It was forbidden. Buried. I never thought I'd reveal it." Jason looked at her, his voice firm. "You want to save your galaxy? Then we dig it up. You trust me?" Vesha nodded slowly. "We are already roommates," she said. "Let's save the galaxy too." And just like that, the fate of two worlds rested in the hands of a half-naked human and a silver-scaled alien roommate. The war had only just begun. Jason and Vesha flew through the dark, silent regions of space in a small stealth ship heading toward the secret coordinates Vesha had shared. The stars around them seemed colder, quieter, like even the galaxy was holding its breath. Vesha said, "The weapon was hidden deep inside an uncharted asteroid field, far beyond known Trell space, where no one dared to go anymore." Jason sat in the pilot's seat, watching her closely. She rarely spoke during the journey, her expression serious, her fingers wrapped tightly around the armrest. When he asked if she was sure about this, she only nodded once and whispered, "It remembers pain." After days of drifting past shattered moons and floating wrecks, they found it, a massive asteroid split open like a wound. Jason guided the ship inside the hollow rock, and there it was, a chamber glowing with ancient energy. In the middle stood the weapon. It wasn't a ship, not in the normal sense. It looked like a giant humanoid figure made of metal and something alive. Black and silver plates overlapped like armor, and blue lights pulsed from its chest and arms. It wasn't turned off. It was asleep. Jason stared, mouth dry. "What is that?" he asked. "The Revenant," Vesha answered. Quietly, a living war machine. Built by Trell minds and human spirit, created during a time of old terror. But we locked it away. It was too dangerous. It binds to one soul only, one mind, one life. Jason stepped forward, drawn to the sphere at the center of the machine's chest. Inside, a cockpit pulsed with energy threads like veins. He looked at Vesha, and she gave a slow nod. "You must enter alone. It will test you. If you are not chosen, it will burn you away." Jason took a deep breath and climbed into the pod. The moment he touched the inner core, the machine came alive. He screamed as energy surged into his body. His vision flooded with images of Earth burning, of stars going dark, of the Voidborn swallowing entire planets. He saw people screaming, ships breaking, and the terrible silence that followed. But he also saw something else: hope, resistance, fire. The Revenant showed him a path, not of destruction, but of survival. It asked a silent question: "Do you fight?" Jason, teeth gritted, answered with a single word: "Yes." Instantly, the chamber blazed with light. The Revenant stood tall, its body glowing with white fire. The metal shifted, wings of energy forming on its back. Jason felt it in his mind now, not like a machine, but a partner. It moved as he thought. It understood him. He was no longer just Jason Reeve. He was its pilot, its heart, its fury. A Voidborn scout ship appeared outside the asteroid moments later, as if drawn by the weapon's awakening. Jason launched in the Revenant. The hangar split open, and the machine burst into space, flying faster than thought. The Voidborn ship fired, but the Revenant dodged with ease. Jason barely had to move. He just imagined a strike, and it happened. The Revenant sent a beam of pure light into the enemy ship, tearing through it. The scout ship tried to vanish into slipspace, but Jason reached out with the Revenant's will and pulled it back. The enemy collapsed under the pressure. It didn't just explode. It crumbled into fragments, erased by power too strong to resist. Jason returned to Visha, breathless, sweating, glowing faintly from the bond. She helped him out of the cockpit, her eyes wide. "You survived," she said softly. Jason smiled. "I think it likes me." They sent a message to Earth using deep space comes. The Voidborn are real. They're coming. But we're not alone anymore. The Revenant lives. For a moment, they heard nothing. Then Earth replied with a single strong message. Engage, hold, humanity is coming. As they prepared to leave, Vasha looked at Jason with something close to awe. "You are now more than human," she said. "You are the soul of war." Jason looked back at the glowing shape of the Revenant, waiting patiently inside the asteroid. "Then let's show them what a soul on fire looks like." Together, they launched toward the stars, ready to bring the fight back to the enemy. The Revenant had awakened, and so had Jason. The Revenant flew ahead of the fleet like a blazing spear as Jason led the last group of human warships toward Titan's grave, a mining colony under attack near Saturn's rings. The Voidborn had arrived before them, and by the time the humans reached the system, the orbit around the colony was filled with shattered metal and drifting bodies. Mining platforms burned in silence, and the once busy sky had become a graveyard. Jason sat deep in the Revenant's core, surrounded by glowing tendrils that linked his thoughts to the living machine. Vasha was aboard one of the lead ships, helping direct the fleet through coordinated strikes. Her voice came through the neural link with calm focus. "There are survivors down there. If the core facility falls, so does the entire operation." Jason didn't reply. He simply moved. The Revenant surged ahead, breaking through the clouds of debris like a thunderbolt. A dozen Voidborn ships hovered in orbit, forming a wall around the planet. The first enemy craft fired a blast of green light, but Jason spun the Revenant sideways and returned fire. White beams roared from its palms, slicing the enemy vessel clean in half. The rest turned and attacked as one, their weapons lashing out in a storm of twisted energy. Jason flew into them without hesitation. He no longer moved the Revenant by hand. He thought, and it obeyed. It weaved through enemy fire, punched through armor, and unleashed burning arcs of power that shattered Voidborn hulls. Human ships joined the battle, missiles trailing smoke and lasers flashing like lightning across the battlefield. For a moment, hope returned. Jason landed near the colony's shield dome and pushed forward on foot. The Revenant shrank and adjusted its shape so it could enter tight corridors, its armor glowing softly as it walked beside Jason. They reached the central control tower where frightened workers and families hid. A little girl pointed at Jason wide-eyed. "Are you a robot?" Jason knelt, smiling. "No, just a man with a big friend." Before they could secure the area, a dark shadow covered the ground. Jason looked up and everything froze. Above them hovered a massive Voidborn ship, far larger than the others. Its surface writhed with strange lights, and the space around it seemed broken. Nothing made sense when looking at it. Angles twisted, Stars bent, and a deep hum filled the air. Jason's skin crawled. "Vesha," he said through the link. "It's here." She didn't need him to say more. She knew what he meant. The anathema had arrived. The same ship that erased the Archangel without firing a single missile. The same ship that turned gravity into knives and silence into fear. Jason stepped back into the Revenant, and the cockpit sealed around him like a second skin. The moment he connected, he felt a wave of pressure in his mind, like a scream without sound. The anathema spoke without words, pressing its presence into his thoughts. It wanted him to run, to kneel, to stop existing. But Jason gritted his teeth and fought back. The Revenant glowed brighter than ever as he rose to meet the enemy. They clashed in orbit where silence ruled. The anathema opened with a gravity pulse that slammed the Revenant into a moon's surface. Jason shook off the pain and launched forward, slashing through the sky like lightning. He hurled a fusion spear into the anathema's outer shell, but it bent space to deflect it. Then it fired something worse-timed distortion waves. Jason saw himself aging and dying in a flicker. But the Revenant shielded him, stabilizing time with sheer force of will. Jason screamed and charged again, smashing through the anathema's forward ring. But with every hit, he felt the enemy learning him, adjusting. Then, without warning, a massive spike of energy struck the Revenant. Jason blacked out. Inside the dark, he found himself floating. Not dead, but somewhere else. He wasn't in space anymore. He was inside the Revenant's memory core. Shadows of the past flickered around him, old wars, broken promises, the first awakening of the Voidborn. He saw a council of long-lost species building weapons out of fear, then sealing them away. He saw Earth in flames again, and the Revenant, standing alone. And then he saw himself, Jason Reeve, surrounded by all the pain and fire of his life. The machine tested him again, asking if he still wanted to carry this burden. He didn't speak. He simply stood tall. The Revenant accepted. The connection deepened. He returned to reality with a roar, and the Revenant exploded with fresh energy. The anathema trembled. For the first time, Jason saw it hesitate. The combined force of the Revenant's soul link and human fury tore through the enemy's outer defense. The anathema reeled and then vanished, escaping through twisted space. Not destroyed, but wounded. Jason collapsed in the cockpit, breathing hard, barely conscious. On the comms, Vesha whispered, "You survived again." Jason answered with a tired smile, "Yeah, but next time, let's make sure we finish it." Below, the colony cheered. Survivors looked to the sky and saw a new kind of guardian standing tall among the wreckage. The Revenant was no longer legend. It was real. And it had just sent a message to the galaxy. Humanity was not finished, not yet. Jason opened his eyes and saw only darkness, but he could feel that he was still alive. His body felt light, as if floating in water, yet his mind was heavy with confusion. He was no longer in the Revenant's cockpit or inside the ship. He was somewhere deeper, somewhere inside the machine's core, where thoughts shaped the world and memory had weight. Around him, colors swirled like smoke, and voices whispered in languages he didn't understand. It felt like a dream, but heavier. Real in a way that was hard to explain. He took a step, and the shadows shifted. Scenes formed in the air around him, playing like old recordings. He saw himself as a child on Earth, staring at the stars. Then he saw Vesha, alone on her homeworld, training as a warrior, her silver scales bruised from combat. Another step forward, and the air showed him the destruction of human fleets. The screams of people lost in space, the ship swallowed whole by the Voidborn. He felt every moment like it was happening again. He wanted to turn away, but the vision pulled him forward. A voice deep, echoing, and not human spoke from the air around him. "You are not ready." Jason clenched his fists. "Then make me ready." The darkness didn't answer. Instead, a new scene appeared, a galaxy long before humans or Trell existed. Strange species filled the stars, building wonders and making alliances. Then, from the edge of time, something awful came. The Voidborn. But they had not started as monsters. They were explorers reaching beyond the edge of space. They found something there, a force, a presence that warped their minds and bodies. They returned not as they were, but as creatures of silence and erasure, wanting to remove anything that reminded them of what they had once been. That force twisted their machines, made them hunger not for power, but for absence. The vision shifted again. Jason saw a war, so old it was nearly forgotten. Ancient empires tried to stop the Voidborn, but one by one they fell. In a last act of desperation, the Trell and a few allies built weapons not controlled by machines, but bound to living souls. The Revenant was one of them. Jason realized now what the Revenant truly was, not just a ship, not just a weapon, but a memory of resistance. A soul that needed a new spark to awaken. That spark was him. The darkness around him began to twist, and he found himself facing a shape, the shadow of the anathema. It didn't speak words. It pressed against his thoughts with cold, endless silence. It tried to smother him, erase him from this space like it did to ships and people. But Jason pushed back, not with weapons, but with will. He remembered every death he had seen, every friend lost, every scream heard over broken comms. He remembered Earth. He remembered Vesha's face as she trusted him with everything. The more he remembered, the brighter the space became. The Revenant responded to his emotions, his memories, his fire. It wrapped around him like armor made of purpose. The anathema tried to crush him again, twisting reality in this mental plane, but Jason stood firm. He roared not in fear, but in defiance, and light exploded from within him. The shadow screamed as it was burned away. The vision broke. Jason woke up gasping inside the Revenant's cockpit. Sweat dripped down his face, and his heart thundered, but he was alive. The cockpit's lights pulsed gently, welcoming him back. Outside, stars flickered, and space was still. He looked around and saw the anathema drifting, wounded and silent. The monster had retreated into a crack in space, disappearing from sensors. The human fleet floated nearby, half destroyed, but still holding formation. Vesha's voice crackled. Through the link, quiet and strained. "Jason, are you awake?" He leaned back, breath shaky. "Barely. What happened?" "You won," she replied. "The anathema is gone, for now." Jason opened the cockpit, and the Revenant shifted its form to allow him to step out. A human shuttle docked beside him, and Vesha climbed out slowly, her left side bruised and her armor scorched. She walked toward him and stopped a few steps away, eyes scanning him. "You shouldn't be alive," she said. Jason smiled weakly. "I've heard that before." She tilted her head. "What did you see?" He looked at the stars, remembering. The visions, the truth, who they were, what they became, and why we have to stop them. Vesha didn't answer for a moment. Then she reached out and touched his shoulder. "You are no longer just a soldier." He looked at her. "Then what am I?" "You are the fire the dark fears," she said softly. Together, they looked out at the wounded battlefield. Ships were being repaired, survivors rescued. The Revenant stood tall, its armor still glowing faintly, watching over them like a silent guardian. Jason knew the war wasn't over. But something had changed. He was no longer fighting as just a man. He was now part of something ancient, something meant to stop the end of all things. And as long as he breathed, he would never let the darkness win. Jason stood on the command deck of the Revenant, watching the growing fleet of human and allied ships gathering in orbit around the shattered moon of Valian Prime. Across every channel, voices echoed with urgency, plans, and distant explosions. The galaxy was responding. The stories of the Revenant had spread like wildfire of a human who had bonded with an ancient war machine and faced the anathema without being erased. Old enemies had put aside their differences, and former rival species now stood shoulder to shoulder. Even the Trell, known for their isolation and pride, sent their finest warships. Vesha stood beside Jason, wearing new armor marked with both human and Trell symbols. The alliance was real now. They were no longer a scattered resistance. They were a unified counterstrike. Jason felt the weight of it pressing on his shoulders, but he didn't back down. He remembered every life lost at Titan's grave, every erased colony, every scream in the silence of space. Now it was time to strike back. The fleet launched together, dozens of warships, carriers, and strike units moving as one, led by the Revenant at the center. Their target was a known void-born stronghold near the Dusk Rift, where time and space bent unnaturally. The Revenant cut through warped space like a knife. Enemy patrols met them in twisted corridors of stars, but Jason moved with speed and fury. The Revenant danced between attacks, beams of fire slicing through ships that once terrified entire systems. Vesha, commanding from the warship Sovereign Flame, directed fleets with deadly precision, her calm voice turning chaos into control. For every void-born ship destroyed, more appeared, but the Allied fleet pressed forward. They reached the rift. At its center floated a giant artificial sphere dark, pulsing, surrounded by broken ships and torn moons. It was a factory, a birthplace for void-born machines. Jason didn't hesitate. He ordered the Revenant forward, leading the charge. The defenders were brutal dozens of strange, spider-like ships that latched onto hulls and tore them apart. Jason fought them off, smashing through their twisted forms with energy fists and burning light. The Revenant took damage, sparks flying across Jason's control pod, but he held on. The deeper they pushed, the stranger things became. Ships blinked in and out of time. Some weapons refused to fire, as if space itself rejected them. Jason realized the Voidborn had twisted physics around their stronghold. But he also realized something else. The Revenant was adapting. It bent space too. It refused to follow broken rules. Jason focused, and the machine obeyed. They punched through walls of gravity, through waves of unmaking energy, and reached the heart of the Voidborn factory. There they found it. A second anathema, not as large as the first, but still filled with terrible power. This one did not. Wait, it attacked with screaming beams of dark fire, sending a human cruiser spinning into a collapsing orbit. Jason faced it directly. The Revenant charged. The battle was brutal. Each strike tore parts from both machines. Jason felt blood on his lip, the machine's damage somehow affecting his body too. But he pressed on, shouting, not from pain, but from pure will. He hurled the Revenant's full power into the anathema's core, breaking it open with a shockwave that sent a ripple across the stars. The explosion ripped apart the factory, and the rift began to collapse. Space folded in on itself. Jason's comms lit up with warnings. Ships had to pull out fast. Vesha's voice came through, filled with alarm. "Jason, you must leave now. The whole area is coming down." But Jason stayed for a few seconds longer, making sure the anathema's remains were truly gone. Then he turned and boosted out of the collapse, engines burning harder than ever. He shot past warships and debris, past breaking asteroids and dying stars, and finally escaped the collapsing rift. The moment he cleared the edge, a blinding light burst behind him. The rift sealed shut, and the Voidborn stronghold was gone. Silence followed, then cheering. Across every comm, every ship, every species, voices shouted in victory. They had won a battle, a true one, not just survival domination. Jason floated in the Revenant, exhausted, bloodied, but smiling. Vesha met him on the deck of the Sovereign Flame. She didn't speak right away. She just looked at him, her eyes softer than he had ever seen them. "You are not only the weapon's soul," she said finally. "You are now our fire, our hope." Jason didn't know how to answer. He was just a soldier once, but now he carried a galaxy's faith. Around them, ships regrouped, repaired, and rearmed. They had won this battle, but they all knew the Voidborn were not done. The anathema was not the last. The war was not over, but something had changed. Humanity was no longer alone, and the Voidborn had learned something new humans didn't break. They burned brighter, and Jason Reeve was the brightest flame of all. The sky over Earth turned black as the final wave of Voidborn ships arrived, their numbers stretching from orbit down to the edge of the atmosphere, blotting out stars and choking signals. Every defense satellite fired, every cannon on every moonbase opened up, but it wasn't enough. The fleet of the Voidborn moved with perfect silence and deadly purpose, aiming to erase Earth the way they had erased so many others. Cities prepared for the worst. Families took shelter underground. Above the clouds, the Allied fleet formed its final line, with Trell cruisers, human warships, and dozens of species holding their ground. And in the center of it all stood the Revenant, glowing white with power, its form sharp and tall like a warrior of ancient legend. Inside the cockpit, Jason's eyes were calm but fierce. Every part of his body hurt, and his thoughts were weighed down by the countless battles behind him. But his heart still burned with the same fire that had started this fight. He looked out at the sea of enemy ships and felt no fear, only duty. Vesha's voice reached him through the comms. Her ship, the Sovereign Flame, held the right flank. "They're coming for you," she said softly. "You are the spark they fear most, Jason gave a short nod, unseen but understood. Then let's show them what fire looks like. The battle began in an instant. The sky lit up with beams, explosions, and missiles screaming across the darkness. The Voidborn crashed against the Allied fleet like a wave made of death, but the defenders held. The Revenant moved with speed and power, slashing through enemy lines, cutting apart ships that could tear human vessels in half. Jason didn't just fight, he led. His every move gave courage to those around him. Even when ships exploded beside him, he pressed forward. He fought for Earth, for Vesha, for every soul the Voidborn had erased. But then the final horror came. The true anathema, larger than anything they'd faced before, unfolded from a rift in space, its size beyond comprehension. The stars bent around it, and reality shivered at its presence. Jason froze. He had fought one before, but this was different. This was their leader, their source. The first and oldest anathema. It did not fire a weapon. It simply existed, and things around it began to die. Ships lost power. Lights flickered. Time twisted. Coms fell silent. Vesha's ship began to drift. Jason felt the pressure on his mind, a weight that tried to push him down, not with force, but with the cold emptiness of non-existence. The anathema wanted to unmake him, but Jason had come too far. He closed his eyes, reached deep into the Revenant, and found something deeper still. A core of light, his memories, his pain, his dreams, and the connection he had built with Vesha. And every soul still fighting. He spoke a single word, not aloud, but through the bond he shared with the machine. Now. The Revenant responded with a shift in power. Its glow became blinding, its body splitting into wings of white fire. Jason unlocked the final phase, the Soulflare Protocol, a fusion of human will and Trell memory tech, something even the machine itself had once feared. He flew straight at the anathema. The monster opened its maw of darkness, trying to pull the Revenant into nothingness. Jason felt his body begin to fade, his edges blur, but he pushed forward, focusing on one thought. I exist. I fight. I protect. The Revenant exploded into the anathema's core like a star being born. There was no sound, no scream, only light. Endless, blinding light. The anathema began to break apart. Not just physically, but in its very presence. Its grip on reality shattered. Its body crumbled into ash and then into nothing. Jason was still inside, and he felt the machine collapsing around him. The Revenant was dying, burned out from the inside. It had given everything. Jason knew he would not return. But he had no regrets. He whispered Vesha's name as the light swallowed him. Then everything went still. Later, across the surface of Earth, people looked up and saw the sky clearing. The black fleet of the Voidborn was gone, scattered or silent. The Allies stood victorious, damaged but alive. The war was over, but Jason did not return. There was no wreckage, no body, only silence. For days, Earth mourned. A statue was built in the center of New Geneva, a tall warrior of light with wings of fire. Vesha stood at its base, watching quietly. She didn't speak, didn't cry, but her eyes held all the pain and all the pride in the world. Weeks passed. Then, one day, a signal came from deep space, faint, broken, but real. A voice, familiar and strong, said only one thing: roommate. I think I found another one. Let's finish this. Vesha's breath caught. She looked at the stars. Somewhere out there, Jason still fought. And she would find him. The war had ended, but the story had not yet. Not as long as he still burned.